Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Streaming Alchemy. I'm John Mahoney, and on today's show, we're going to take our first look at an AI-based production tool. And for this tool, we've selected MidJourney, which is an image generation tool that has multiple interfaces. But for today's show, we're going to look at its basic web interface and how you can leverage that to generate images. But before we get to that, I want to invite everybody, please, if you have any questions, any comments, just put them in the show notes and we'll try to get to them right here on the show. Also, if you'd like to join us live on air, we have a link in the show notes and up here on the screen for where you can go, and somebody from the studio will get you on with us. Okay, so like I said, this is our first look at an AI tool. And the reason we selected MidJourney is that it seems to cover the most potential use cases, everything from pre-production, post-production, assets around, things you're going to use in presentations for shows, signage, screens in the background, things of that sort. So we felt that was a really good place to start. And also, it is a fairly straightforward interface at its base level, but it also has a lot of depth to it. So as you learn it, you'll be able to do a whole lot more with that. So I'm going to start by looking at certain images generated with, but before we do that, I just want to jump over and say hi to everybody that has joined us already. So Automation, thank you. I appreciate you joining. Gunnar, glad you're here. Oh, you demand. Always good to have you here. Thank you. So, Warren, William Warren, thank you. I appreciate it. Definitely good to have you here. Okay, so let's get back before I jump out. So I think the best way to understand what MidJourney can do before we get into any of the technical aspects of generating imagery is to just look at some of the images that can be created with it. And the basic model, so I'm going to sort of sit here, is that you can give MidJourney a prompt, which is what we have down here at this lower part, where, so in this case, it says an empty news desk in a film studio, and I want it to look cinematic. And that is the image it generated. So this is a very basic prompt that you can give MidJourney to have it generate something. But it has a whole variety of things. This is another very simple image that you can, very simple prompt to generate what would be a very complex image, something that for a photographer would take a while to set up and get all the elements in place and a shot out of that. So, and again, this is just saying it's a simple, photograph of a Frenchie in a flower pot sort of thing. So that's another style of image that you can get from this. You can also get just sort of diagrammatic style images, things that would be sort of illustrations, any types of posters, things of that sort. So you can, with a more complete description, do a lot more inside the image and get it to be pretty specific to the types of things you're looking for. You also can do things that are, you wouldn't think, like this is a logo that was generated. And you can see, I mean, it has a lot of specificity in the prompts that it gave for this logo. And one of the things you'll notice is not only did it like specifically say, I want New York City careers, NYC careers in text in this, and it was able to do that, which very few of the image generation programs are able to work with text that way. But it also, gave a sense of what it wanted, and it also mentioned a style. So Neville Brody is an illustrator, and it is applying the styles of the imagery that Neville Brody has created to the image that you're asking it to create. So again, another very powerful mechanism, and this is a very different style of image. We also can do things like line drawings, which are, this is a cartoon style, but again, very descriptive. And in this case, it's also saying R.K. Laxman. So it's using an existing artist as a style reference to say, this is the style that I'd like to see in the image that you generate, and then having very, very specific details about what it wants in that image. The last thing I want to show here, though, is you can actually create things that are fairly photorealistic in this. You saw the picture of the Frenchie, which is one thing, but this is something where you can see there's imagery in the background that's got shallow depth of field. It's got a shallow, a blurred foreground. So you also have that. It's really using the depth of field on both sides, not just blurring the background and everything sharp in the foreground. This is giving you a true camera style image out of this. And, you know, with fairly realistic looking people in this case. So that's sort of the breadth of imagery that you can create, but it has a lot of, you know, other types and styles. You know, you can do things that are fantasy based, that are for like, you know, anime, manga, comics, anything like that. So based on where your creative center is, there's a lot of different imagery that you can have MidJourney generate. So with that sort of as a background, I think we had a few more comments posted in. So let me get to those, and then we'll jump in and start to take a look at MidJourney itself. So we got Michael. Michael, great to have you here. Always good to see you. Thank you. So Michael's asking, how can you be sure you're not violating anyone's copyright intellectual property? I guess, you know, this is one of the things that will always, you know, come up. And my recommendations typically would be around making sure that if you're doing something commercially, you don't do things that would use imagery that's very similar. So you would sort of, if it were a real world copyright issue, you would make sure you're not copying somebody else's work, even if you're sort of reinterpreting it. But, you know, so you want to do things that have clear delineation from that. And for my own self, if I were doing something that I was doing commercially, I probably wouldn't reference artist styles in there, because I think there is still some debate around what elements are copyrightable. In all likelihood, it isn't something that would place you in jeopardy, but it would be something that I would avoid. But that being said, art in general is something where one artist inspires another. So taking inspiration from what other people do and sort of trying to apply that inspiration into what you do, I think is sort of part of a legitimate artistic process. So, but this is, I mean, you know, this is certainly, to Michael's point, this is a evolving area in copyright for what is permitted and what isn't permitted with AI generated imagery, videos, text, etc. So, you know, it's something that I think you have to read the terms of use and everything else that come with MidJourney and make sure that if it says there are certain restrictions to what you can do with the images, that gets respected. And that may be different country to country, you know, because there's clearly different laws in different regions that impact this. And also, you know, sort of go with, you know, if you have internal legal advice, certainly take that, but also go with what you feel is right and appropriate, what you would do if you were working with other artists and how you would interact with them. I sort of take the same thing here. So, and, you know, I think that's probably about as clear, you know, as I can be. It's still definitely evolving. And yeah, I mean, inspiration and copying are two different things. And I think that's the important point. You shouldn't try to copy what somebody else did and just sort of, yeah, it was generated by AI, so it's okay. I don't agree with that. But, you know, to be inspired, people have been inspired through the ages by the art of others. So, you know, there's very, that's probably very organic in terms of what would be accepted. But I think there's probably enough case law to say that inspiration is still okay. And that's still, something that you can feel free to use. All right, so let me sort of jump over here and we can get to MidJourney and take a look. So this is the web interface for MidJourney. MidJourney has two interfaces. One is just web-based, and that's newer, and I think it's probably a good place for everyone to start. It also has one that works in Discord. It probably has a few more advanced features that you can leverage in that, but I think you can do 95% of everything you can do in one in the other. So this is definitely a good place to start. And what they do here is they give you sort of a general overview of artwork that other people have created. And that's one of the things with MidJourney, based on what plan you have, things you create will be visible to other people. So again, something to keep in mind if you're doing something for a client, you probably want to make sure that the subscription level you have with MidJourney is appropriate for the confidentiality. Certain ones have private imagery, others have publicly shared imagery to inspire others. So things like that. The pricing for MidJourney is sort of it starts at like $10 a month to $28 a month to I think it's $100 a month, enterprise, commercial grade license. So different price points for this. But, everything I'm showing you now, I'm doing with the $10 a month version. I'm clearly not using this for anything we're producing, for clients. This is only for educational purposes and what we do here on the show. So I think, you can get though a sense of what you can do at the basic subscription level. And so what you see here are just a range of images that are produced by people. If you find any particular image that you like, and you said, ooh, I really would like to know how they did this, you can actually click on the image. And what this will do is it'll show you a bigger image of the picture and let you go in and see this is exactly what they typed in to get this image. And, this again can help you come up to speed. And as I said, this is the sort of thing that would inspire you. Like say you weren't interested in doing, a cyberpunk Zeppelin as they described as here, but say you actually wanted to do something with a specific automobile or a building, you could still come back and say, I actually like the black and white monoline coloring book picture. So this sort of thing you can now take and say, that's something I could use in a prompt, and I'm probably going to get something that's very close to what I'm seeing here. And you can use what other people are doing now to sort of grow and develop your own vocabulary for creating imagery in MidJourney. And I think that's really important because in this case, especially as you're starting out, you will want to understand what people did to, to sort of create the images you see. And a lot of that will give you sort of that correct vocabulary when you want to do things that are in that same general genre of image. So that's, this is Madame Curie made with paper. So, I mean, that's a pretty basic thing, and it can come up with some pretty creative stuff for that. But that's what you get with the Explore tab. But if you want to start to create things yourself, that's where you go from the Explore tab to the Create tab. Now in the Create tab, so these are things that I've been playing with, but basically anything that you want to create in MidJourney has two components to it that you have to work with. The first is up here, which will be a prompt, what you want to have created. And it's sort of descriptive, and we'll go into prompts a little bit later, but this will be something where you sort of talk about what's in the composition, what sort of styles do you want to use, what sort of medium do you want it to be rendered in, different types of things like that. But then from that, you also get to control other detailed elements of the image that you want to generate. And so if I sort of just go through this, you have the ability to generate images all the way from sort of a, 1:2, very tall image. And, you can slide this over and it sort of covers everything in the middle grounds all the way up to a 2:1, very wide image. And so this lets you sort of focus in on what you actually want to see. So like if you're doing video work, this would be a standard 16:9 that you probably want to generate. And that will get you that framed image as a 16:9. There are other things in here. Inside of MidJourney, there are multiple models that are available. And these are all different models of like the large language models that it uses. These are the models that it used for different levels of MidJourney when it did different releases. And different models had different sort of characteristics and looks. So if you wanted to, you could pick an older model to say, I like that look. It wasn't as realistic, but it had a certain feel to it, a certain expression to it that I want to capture. And you can go back and change the model that you use. It also lets you do stuff where you can say, I want to use sort of my mode can be standard or raw. And what standard versus raw is, inside of the different models, they have a certain, I'll say, personality. When you say a simple thing like a French bulldog in a flower pot, they interpret that in different ways. And so that can give you, by saying, I want to use this different model, you're saying that model is going to do more interesting things in the background, or it's going to have different colors or different interesting lighting. I don't have to specify that, sort of what it does by default. So you can tell it to do that, or you can tell it to go into raw, which is basically saying, do the minimum amount of interpretation of what I'm asking you to do to give me an image. So this will try to put less of its own spin on it and keep it more toward exactly what you are asking. Of course, that's not possible in an incomplete, prompt that you may give it, but it'll have the least character of its own character to the images it creates. And another thing that you can do is you can create personalized views. And what a personalized view is, you can go through all of the things in the Explore tab and say, I really like this one. I didn't like that one. I didn't care one way or the other about this one. And so as you go through this, what this will let you do is create a personalization profile of what imagery you like and what imagery you don't care for. And it will use that to bias the types of images it generates when you prompt it. And so you can turn that on or off to how much you want personalization. The speed element over here is just how much you're willing to pay. And I have this on relaxed. You can only ask MidJourney to generate a certain number of images at a fast speed or a turbo speed. And basically, I think you get like 200 minutes or something like that in the base plan of fast-based renders. And when you go turbo, it's even, burns up even faster than normal. So what this lets you do is, if you have time, you can ask it to generate images and it's not burning through those fast minutes. So it takes longer to get the image, but it's not burning up the time you have allocated for fast renders. So this could be something where, based on your time frame, you either use relax or you use fast, and keep within the allotted minutes of fast render time that you have in any given month. So that's sort of the big elements on the sides. But when it comes to stylizing the picture, creating that image, there are things they call aesthetics. And there are 3 aesthetic elements that you can set. One is called stylization, which is basically how stylized, how much stylistic leeway do you want to give MidJourney in generating the image. So, this would be sort of when you would work with an actual designer, where you would tell them, I just want something that, has a flower pot in it, and I don't care, how you do it. Give me something that's a good flower pot. It's sort of that level. So how much latitude am I giving MidJourney to stylize that? If you have something, on the high end of stylized, you could end up getting things where, the flower pot's in a hat on somebody's head, where it's sort of taking that way out there liberty to create something stylistic, as opposed to keeping it sort of low and giving it sort of a minimum of latitude. So that's, basically one of the things you got. You have a weirdness thing, which will just, it'll create sometimes very weird and very disturbing imagery that makes no real sense. But sometimes you get some incredible things that could actually inspire other ways to think about what you want to capture. So that's the second area. And the other is variety, which basically says every time you ask MidJourney to generate something, it gives you 4 images. And so what variety says is how much variety do you want between the 4 images I give you? And, I think that's probably a good place for me I want to go back and show you some examples of how this would work. So let me just switch over here to sort of pick this up again. Let me go. So, yeah, so I'll sort of move through here. So if we look at the aesthetic controls in more detail, what I wanted to do was basically say, this is the prompt that I gave it. And so I want a photorealistic image of a doctor consulting with a patient in a hospital room with soft light coming in through blinds on the window. So fairly, straightforward type of request. And then what I did is, this is it at its defaults. The stylization is set to 100, weirdness 0, and variety 0. So this is basically giving you this is the first generation of things that you would see. And, it doesn't get everything correct. Some of these look like 2 doctors talking with each other, but you are capturing the essence of this. And this is what we have here. But now when I upped the stylization, I got these images. And you can see that these definitely have a lot more character to them. In this case, they didn't have the second doctor, but the second doctor was almost implied. And it's a patient laying in a bed with the blinds to the window. In this one, it's a sunset with 2 people sort of sitting on the edge of the bed and talking. This is more in a lab setting as opposed to a traditional hospital room. And this is sort of in a consulting office with a doctor and a patient, but this patient sort of has a stethoscope around them, so doesn't always get it right. But you get a sense of how upping the stylized portion can give you very different character to the images. But now, if we came back and said, I want to up the weirdness, these are the things that we get. So, this first one up here is, it's okay. It isn't what I would have had in mind necessarily. This one here, I don't know what I'm seeing. And that's what I said. You can have stuff that looks kind of disturbing. I'm not sure what all these pieces and parts and how all this stuff is interconnected. But again, sometimes the weird things can give you inspiration for describing your shot. You may really like the way the curtains and the blinds look in this because of the angle it took. So things like that. But in these cases here, you can see this is, somebody sitting by a counter or standing by a counter. So not really what we wanted, and this one is like something very strange with sort of a little person and a big person, and it doesn't look like it's all in proportion. But this distorted view may be something that said, I really like that. As it goes deeper, it sort of has more of a distorted sense of depth that, wow, that could work for how I want it. And then you can add that to a description and give yourself another avenue. So a lot of these things I find with weirdness are more for inspiration and ideas and composition rather than to generate a specific usable image, even though sometimes you can get some things that you definitely would want to use. So the last thing is variety. And in the variety center, this is, I set it up, at 80 out of 100. And so this gives you a really good sense when it said variety. It's taking what I have here And now saying, this is giving me something which looks almost like a comic book image at a bit of a Dutch angle with two people. This gives me sort of an anime 3D style. This is a very classic thing. Uh, this gives you almost that like Pixar style of something that you would see where they, can sort of capture characters with 3D animation, a certain lighting and style. So each of these with variety, I have one that sort of gives me a doctor and a patient talking. But these are all interesting shots that could give me inspiration to say, I really like to move in this direction and keep doing that. So that's what you're getting when you look at, the basic controls over the imagery. So I know there was sort of a lot I threw out there, but hopefully some of the visuals here will give you a sense of what those sliders do. And then the rest of it is really just, on off switches for how you wanted to decide to generate pictures. So, okay. So the next piece though, is we talked in general terms about, everything that it can generate for imagery, but let's talk a bit more about the prompts. We sort of did all the controls and the sliders. So if I'm looking at MidJourney prompts, I think you have to start to think of it in the context of what are the major descriptive elements you should include in a prompt to get a good start point. And I think one of the keys when, before we get into prompting in any detail, prompting is something that you're going to do iteratively if you're using MidJourney to generate imagery. So you will start with something that you think is a good prompt. And you'll see certain images back. You can ask it to run it multiple times with subtle variations. And that sort of stuff is baked in to how you can generate things. But you have to view it as saying, based on what I'm getting back, what do I need to change in my prompt and refine in my prompt to get it to be closer to what I'm actually thinking of? And this can, be, as I said, multiple iterations. So it isn't something where you're just going to type it in and you have the perfect prompt and you're going to get the perfect results. It'll be a back and forth. And, that's something to keep in mind. But let's sort of go through the core of a prompt that I used to generate this image. And I've broken this down into different elements of the prompt. And the first one is, what is the medium that you want for this prompt? So in this case, I said, I want a cinematic image. That's not exactly a medium. And, you can be very specific. I could say I want a line drawing in a certain style. I want to have, this should be a acrylic on canvas. This can be a sketch, however you want to frame it. So that's the description of what's the medium that I'd want you to create this in. So in this case, I sort of left it fairly open. And I just said, I want a cinematic image. So it could have gone in different directions with that. It could have gone, to drawings, to paintings, whatever, but still keep the concept of cinematic, wide scale, deep, a lot of information in an image. But then the next thing I said is, but what elements do I want to capture in this image? And this is where I kept it fairly straightforward. So I said, a bearded man in his early 30s holding an iPad. So that was sort of where I set it. So create a medium, create the elements that you want inside to be rendered by that medium. Then you create a setting. And this is saying, I have this medium and these elements. Now, where do I want to place them? So this is sort of the stage that you're setting your elements on. And in this case, I said a sci-fi style coffee shop on a spaceship, and he has a venti Starbucks cup on the table in front of him. Because I'm thinking Starbucks works with space, so that works out really well. We're Dunkin' people, just to be clear, but Starbucks worked here. And there were people sitting at other tables, and out the window, you can see a planet in the distance to the dark of space. And that's really, if you look, that is what was captured here. It's the planet. You can see the dark of space out the window. He's got the coffee cup. You can see the other people in the background sort of fade out. He's holding his iPad. So all that information was there. And then I sort of said, I want this image framed as a wide shot. So because I said cinematic, a wide shot is sort of implied. And this is another thing that I just want to touch on. And you'll, as you work with MidJourney, you'll get to see this. You can turn around and look at certain shots and say, what would be the correct aspect ratio for them? So if I had this as a, a 1:1 or even like a 9:16 aspect ratio, it may not be able to figure out how to generate a cinematic image in that aspect ratio because it doesn't have sort of that wide scope to paint it. So you can give it conflicting messages and it tries its best. But when you're looking at this, sort of being explicit and saying, I want this as a wide shot, can be helpful because you're sort of confirming what it was probably doing given the width of the image. And then what you sort of turn around and you can tell it very specifically the style of this. So this is, in this case, it's shot with a full frame camera and a 24mm lens and very photorealistic. So all of these things that I put together give it a description of the image that I wanted. So medium, element, setting, framing, and style. So you sort of think of those as when I create a prompt, I should have something filled in for each of those that is detailed enough to really communicate what I want to MidJourney and then see what it comes back with and start to work from there. But one of the things I did is I said, let me keep all of these other elements the same and just turn around and change the style. What would I get that could be different? And so I did this where the only thing is I said a cartoon style line drawing, gave it stroke thickness and sort of, black and white sketch. So that's what I put as my style. And you can see it captured sort of the same thing that was in the first thing. The people at the table in the background, the coffee cup, the iPad, the planet out the window with, the darker space. So all of these things are there, but it's a totally different look. And this would be something that, like, if you did a graphic novel or a comic book, you could see that sort of imagery would be perfect for that. So this is the sort of thing now where just changing parts of a prompt can have a significant impact on the type of output you get. And I think that's important to consider when you're thinking of how you can sort of frame prompts up in a way that would be descriptive, and to also try different styles and other things to see what communicates best. So sometimes a photorealistic shot may not always be best. So sometimes getting a shot like this could have other details in it that you say, ooh, I'd love to put that in. So play around with the different elements that you have in your prompt and really try to, focus in on what works for you in a given set of iterations with MidJourney. So in a prompt, though, there's a few things that I think are really important when we talk about prompts. You should definitely be very specific with both the subject and the background. If you want a person to be wearing certain clothing, if you want them to be a certain age, if you want them to have a beard or clean shaven, male or female, anything you want in terms of description, make sure you include it and be very specific about it, because that's important to getting the sort of feedback loop started that you need with MidJourney to create something useful. The other thing is, don't be overly complicated. And the reason I say this, you can be very detailed, but if you ask it to do a lot of different things that require interpretation, you can end up confusing the AI or creating conflicting messages to it, where you don't see them as conflicting. But if you turn around and saying, I want certain lighting, but then you say, I like these colors and those colors don't go with the lighting, all these sorts of things, you can end up getting things that are just like, it ignores you completely or ignores some of them, and it could be very frustrating. So keep complexity down to a minimum. But in this, you can reference specific colors. Like say you're working with a client that has certain brand colors. You can actually even use hex codes for their colors. You know, where you turn around and say what convert the Pantone color to a hex color, and you can actually do things that would match up with their color scheme that they need. And that could be great when you're doing things like graphic art, where you may do posters or other stuff, and you want to use those for signage or other things that you're using for production. You can do that and make sure you have that coordination with their own branded imagery that they have. You can refer to general art styles or to those of specific artists. And like I said, I think getting into things of specific artists, I wouldn't use those for specific paying clients, but as ways to generate ideas of what you'd like to see, that could be very useful. And I can give you things, but it would do things that are general art styles. Where you can say, I'm looking for something that looks like Cubist, or it looks like it's older artists, like this looks like Monet, or Cezanne, or it looks like a Van Gogh. So things where you sort of sit there and say these would be more art that is in the public space, and you should feel comfortable sort of mimicking in style. So, but this gives you a lot of flexibility. You shouldn't be afraid to do that when you're sort of talking about it. And the other pieces describe the lighting of the image. How do you want it lit? Is it soft light? Is it hard light? Does it have different colored lighting? Lighting at the edges? Is the light coming through a window? All these different types of things, because that's going to create better imagery that you'll get rendered at the other side. And the other thing is you can describe the mood. You can say it's dark, it's foreboding. You can do things like say, this is like cyberpunk, or things that have sort of an overall atmosphere to them, and use those as descriptions. And the other thing you can do is you can use things like transparent area or white background to try and get usable overlays. And this can be very useful if you're looking to composite different things, where you're creating certain things, but you wanted certain elements to be generated. That's something that definitely you could work with and get something closer to what you want, but only using MidJourney for parts of that. And the last thing is there is a -- no parameter, which is a way to exclude things. Inside your prompts, if you name something, it doesn't understand. Even if you say, I want this coffee shop, but don't put any people in it, it won't get that. But if you want to, you say, I describe your coffee shop you want, and then go -- no people, -- no, empty coffee cups, whatever. You put these things in, and it will respect that then. But that's how you get it to not do things, because sometimes in a description, the negative things that you can, the things you want as negative in that, I don't want this and I don't want that, that can be very important to creating the image that you want. So I think we have, Michael was saying something. So yeah, so each one of these pictures, it takes anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute to create. So you get 4 of them with that basic subscription. And it's for me, for what I was doing here, I think that was fine. And I also think in an artistic flow, getting these immediate things back isn't necessarily, if you're working sort of on things overall and you're trying to refine stuff, there's a process where you're probably going to be thinking about things and trying things back and forth. So it's probably that amount of time isn't unreasonable, but you don't always have that as a guarantee. There are times where you could sit there and go, yeah, I put this in and it took 5 minutes this time for me to do something, and you don't have that, definite, you're going to get it delivered in 10 seconds and that's it. But most of the time it was fine with, 30 seconds and getting me something. So that's, that's definitely, something you can use. And yeah, I mean, this is good. So Michael's saying to take something like a MidJourney picture or poster and use another tool to animate it. There are tools that will do that. So, and these are things that I hopefully will, I'm not going to go and just do something unless I've used it enough myself to be able to talk comfortably about it. So I haven't used any of those, but I know there are other tools that will take a still image and do things like convert it into a 3D object, or to do things where it creates it into an animated video and uses that as reference. So there are other things, and I hopefully will be able to get to some of those and see, how well they do. And when I do, I'll share that. That will be, I want in this season to cover more of these tools. And, let me talk a moment about it, because I know there's a lot of controversy, around using these AI tools, and, different artists feel different ways. And I have an understanding for both sides of the argument for how these tools are used. But what I think is important is that every artist that's working today, every creative, should at least understand what these tools do, and use them to the extent that they feel comfortable, within their own sense of how AI should play a role in society. And I don't mean to overstate that, but I understand where that's coming from. In a lot of cases, this could be something where it can get you unstuck. It can give you some initial ideas that you would get from other things that could inspire you. And so you may turn around and say, I'm never going to use an image that was generated by MidJourney. But it got me thinking about different compositions and different styles that I could then take and say, this is how I'd like to do this, and then go off and do it yourself. So I think there are, cases across the board where you can say, yeah, for me, if I'm not an artist and I'm doing things for my church or for, nonprofits, and I'm not getting paid, turn around saying, this may be something that I could use to generate things for that. You could also say, if I'm a small producer and I don't have big budgets, I want to, hire artists for the things I can afford for this, but other places I'm going to, use AI to do that. No, I just don't feel comfortable. But in any of those cases, I think there are use cases for AI, and you definitely at least need to be aware of what it can do, primarily because in all likelihood, you'll be coming up against people who are using these tools, and you should understand how that could impact your ability to work in the market, in different scenarios at different price points, and, get comfortable with where you feel along this curve. So, that's not preachy. I'm just sort of thinking about this in the broader context of how AI plays into the creative space, and, how it impacts creatives in general. And it does. There's something that's real here that we have to acknowledge. But, as I said, understand it, and that will give you a better way to know to what level you want to integrate it and work with it, and what level you're going to compete with it, and how you can highlight the differentiation that you bring to things from your, own direct creatives elements, and create something that is unique. And I think that's every creative is selling something that is hopefully unique and valuable to the client, and that's sort of where we come from with this. All right, so to wrap this up, since we're talking about understanding where this plays in, what I'd like to do is look at where MidJourney is strong in terms of image generation, and also where it's not that strong, and sort of go from there. So if I come here and start to look at MidJourney's strengths, it does very well with artwork that mimics styles. So this is just something that I did because it gives you a sense of, this was the same prompt where I just wanted a portrait of Steve Jobs. And so in one case, I asked it, because we saw the picture before, with an R.K. Laxman style, which is sort of a ink on paper kind of look. And it gave me that. But then with the same prompt, and I just gave it a different artist here, which was Chuck Close, who has his own sort of style, it gave me a completely different influence. But it does a really good job at using a style and sort of saying, this is what that type of style that I want. And to be honest, the style can actually be your own. And we'll go to this when we look at MidJourney and other videos, other streams we do in the future. But you can actually give it like references of your own art and ask it to do things that look like your own art. And you can use those sorts of things as references. So this is not just copying somebody else. This could be things that you turn around and saying, this is work that I did that I'd like to reproduce and go in another direction in. So you can do things like that. And it does a very good job with that. Diorama style work. This is normally something that you would probably do either in 3D modeling or with sort of models and photography. And it can do these types of things fairly well, where you can be deeply descriptive and then get really cool looking perspective shots with that diorama feel, sort of the 3D miniatures look. And that works really well as well with the MidJourney. The other thing is urban landscapes, and it does these types of things really well. So this would be a great sort of backdrop if you wanted to sort of, sort of blur it out. And, if you did this right with, integrate this with elements, you could put text over this and it could be something, that would be really cool. So it does that really well. And it does general objects really well. So this is sort of a phone booth in a city, late day, raining. I think that was the general description I put. But this also is a good segue to what it doesn't do well. Because if you look in the phone booth, it has something that it thinks is a phone, but I am not sure I've ever seen a phone like that in any phone booth. And that is, if we really look at it, this is where MidJourney has a lot of weaknesses. And the first one I really want to touch on is it's really weak with actual technology. This is a really cool shot composition. If I were doing a product overview and I wanted to take a shot, that would be a cool looking shot. Except this stuff makes no sense when you look at it. There's no camera that has things like this hanging off of it. And, it's got like lots of squiggly knobs and stuff that don't necessarily make sense. But the lens generally looks right. So it's sort of at a quick glance, actual technology is okay. But when you look at it, and especially anybody in a field that knows it, it's not usable in a real sense. The other thing it can do with actual technology is just get things that are strange, where this was actually asked it to generate an image of a switcher with certain angles and stuff. These buttons on the switch, first, it doesn't look like a switcher. It doesn't have any real relationship to an actual production switcher. But these buttons are really organic looking. They're sort of curved and moving up and down. It's not the way technology would be organized. And there's a lot of just scattered widgets. So it sort of doesn't know when to stop. It just, if one button and light is good, 20 are even better. And it's just how it sort of approaches actual technology. So that's it. It's definitely weak in creating that. The other thing is if you ask it to create an image that has text in it. Now the image itself, like this is, I asked it to create an image of the Declaration of Independence. And you're used to seeing that shot with all the text from the Declaration. It doesn't generate its own text. So it's just sort of creating squiggly lines that look like somebody wrote. And, it has the, the we, the people and all that stuff. That's sort of its own interpretation of that, but there's no real text in here. That said, it can generate text like you saw when we had the logo for New York City, where it did the NYC, I forget what it was, events or something. This is something that you can tell it to put specific text in to things, but it's not going to generate that text on its own, even if it's from a known thing with text. So if you ask it to put a billboard up for a hospital, over a street corner or something, there's going to be garbage text in that billboard. It may have an image of a doctor and it will look like a billboard, but it's just going to be non-text text. something that may look like text in an alien language, but that's it. So that's the other thing that it doesn't do well. It doesn't do interconnected things well. And if you notice here, this microphone is levitating in the desk. So it's sort of sitting there and it doesn't have anything that's moving, that's holding it up, or no wires coming or anything like that. And even things with the light where it has this thing, the light sort of just looks a little disjointed. So when things have lots of, extended interconnected pieces, it can get lost in that, even though other elements in this are really nice. And, the MacBook on the desk and the person there, that all came out nice. Just certain interconnected elements don't work. And then it can do creepy things with limbs. So as you can see, this person is just interconnected in the front. And they have one watch. I'm not sure how they got it on. It must be a removable band. But that's how this thing is set up. So limbs, hands, it can do a terrible job, and you get some really weird results. 6 fingers, different things like that. It does it a lot better than it used to. So just sort of to put that there. So there are plenty of times where you can get correctly generated people. It's just something to be aware of. Anytime you generate an image which has a person in it, do a very thorough inspection that fingers, toes, all that stuff is counted, and it looks right. But the other thing you'll see here is that this is another thing with interconnected things. It has the mic here and it's on a stand. There's no wire coming out the mic. There is wire coming down the stand, but then you have this wire that's sort of coming out the table going over. So it doesn't get those types of things right. And sometimes like layout things where, it has this MacBook sitting over here, sort of to the side of the desk and facing away. So that wouldn't be a natural shot that you'd normally get. So these are things that it doesn't do well. But here's the reason why it can be really worthwhile. And I want to point to the thumbnail that we used for this show here and on YouTube. This would be a shot that I probably would not find in any sort of stock imagery. And if I had somebody create it, they would probably have to create this either in a non-photorealistic way or through some significant 3D modeling that they would then take and compose these pictures to. And for these types of images where they don't really exist in the real world, this can, using something like MidJourney can really make a huge difference. To get somebody to 3D model this probably would be out of the budget of most productions, to get this photorealistic modeling and lighting and everything else to set it up as a scene. So this is the sort of thing where I think MidJourney really can shine. And that's what I just want to say. There are certain areas where it probably just is a great fit for the types of things you do, even if you are working with artists on other aspects of a production and for other elements of an event, things like that. There may be certain elements, even the artists themselves may turn around and say, I'd rather you spend your budget on the things that I can do myself really well. And, we use tools to generate some of these other things. So just another thing to think about, but I thought this was a good shot that sort of explained that. And it covers the concept that I wanted. So this is an illustrative shot as well, where you have sort of the robot child looking in a museum at all the old cameras that used to be there. So if we get back to the sort of the title of this, are stock images going to be obsolete now? The answer is no, they're clearly not. But I think that you can use this with stock imagery as a way to sort of combine and modify and enhance elements, graphic elements that you will be using in your production. And so I think both of them are very firmly entrenched as tools with very specific roles. And it really is going to depend, but we have multiple stock image subscriptions with Adobe, and story blocks, which is, we use both of those for stock imagery. We've added this, and again, we just keep it at the low end of the licensing. And we think that's appropriate for where this would fit in for the things that we'd be doing with graphics. So hopefully that gives you a good sense of what MidJourney does and what you can do with it. Let's see, do we have a few more comments here? So yeah, so Michael's saying about creating unique virtual sets. I think there are lots of things that you can do with that. And, yes, you can use this to create elements of sets and then composite those together in Photoshop, or use these to create different types of textures that you'd want to put on walls in 3D models. So lots of different ways to do that. And I think it could help with virtual sets, but it could also do realistic, just like chroma key backgrounds. Like right now, this is a real set, but if I had this as just a green screen and I wanted to put a background, you definitely could generate things like that for backgrounds. So Spatial, thank you. I appreciate that. This is something that, I definitely want some feedback on, because, we said we wanted to do more things that talked about AI. And so your feedback collectively is really valuable. Where would you want me to focus going forward on, on different AI topics? And, how much do you really want to go? This is just like a couple of shows. We'd like a few more deep shows that really go into different ways to leverage it. Just let us know. But Spatial, thank you. There is a, when I say connectivity, I guess what I'm really trying to do is things that have a complex sequence of elements that go together. And sort of, I'll put it that way. And I think, that's even true with, when it talks about hands and other things. This is just a complex sequence of elements. So that can be confusing. But thank you, Michael. Yes. So, all right then. So why don't we jump to our post show then? I appreciate all of you taking the time to join us live here. If you can hang around for the post show, that would be great. And we'll see you in just a minute. If you can't, we're doing these shows now every other week. So we will have a show in 2 weeks. So I think that's March 14th, I think it will be. So that will be our next show, Friday, March 14th. And if you can't join for the post show, we'll see you then. Take care, be well. Hello, welcome to our post show. Thank you everybody for hanging around a little bit longer. So, yeah, my thinking with adding AI to the mix that we're doing this season is that I keep hearing from a lot of different creatives that it is something they're a bit afraid of, and also something that they're not really comfortable. They don't understand what it does, what it can't do. And I just feel that in this space, especially because all of us deal with technology, typically that are watching this show, understanding these tools can be very helpful. And it can help us, first, I think, feel less intimidated because we get to understand their limitations, and the limitations are real. It can make us feel more empowered because we are also looking at things now through the lens of what can I do with this and still stay true to where my values as a creative are. And I also think, it fills in gaps that we don't have, either we don't personally have skills and talents in, but we sort of would do our best, and this can help that. Or, it can also do things where it just creates elements that we combine with other things that we're doing. So, I think that's probably, why this can be helpful. So thank you for that feedback, though. I definitely appreciate it. So, Bowles Promo TV, thank you for joining. So yeah, I mean, doing things for with Photoshop, I think are great. Uh, Photoshop does have things where you can do sort of intelligent fill, where it looks at what's around it and tries to fill it. You can also do generative fill in Photoshop, where you can say like change things like the sky. But this is also something where you can generate elements yourself, where if you wanted to create backdrops that you can use for or graphic designs for sidebars that could reflect your in your case your sport, a particular event, if it's a specific institution, a specific industry, there may be things where it's like, yeah, I'm just not going to be focused on that because it's just part of my PowerPoint slides, but this could be something that could be really useful to use AI for. So yep, and I agree. Photoshop is, I view, if you're going to use something like MidJourney and stock art in general, I think having Photoshop or something similar to edit, combine, composite is important. So I have to say this was an interesting experience for me, getting through the getting a thorough sort of sense of everything that was going on with MidJourney, because it opened my eyes to a lot of different things in the way the program works, but also I get a sense of the progress. So it was really good doing it. And I think if you get the chance to sort of do a serious walkthrough, it would definitely worth it. Even if you sort of say I would just want it for a month to get to understand it, it would be $10. I think there would be money well spent for that. But it was really fascinating getting to see what it can and can't do. And some of the cool things we've generated with it. So Michael's saying, as a senior programmer, I started using ChatGPT to ease his whole transition to a new language. And yeah, he's saying he needs a long discussion with it to get code out of it. So yeah, and this is something because my son, Matt, who works with us on the show at the company here, he's a programmer as well, and he has found that it is a tool. Using different types of AI-based tools around code, it's becoming more and more important today, primarily because it frees, at least from his view, what he said is it frees him up from some of the more mundane things that he would have to do as a programmer, so he can focus on the more complex and intricate things in the code. And this is almost, like people would take code stubs and sort of put them together. You can use it really well for that. And I think it works the same way in the art field. You can use things to create basic frameworks through AI, basic elements, but then how you composite those elements, I think, is really the artistic, a big artistic dimension to this. And the other thing is how you create the prompts is an artistic dimension to that. At the end of the day, it's just doing what you tell it to. Maybe not exactly how you'd like it to, but it's doing what you tell it to. And as an artist, understanding light, understanding how you'd like something lit, understanding how you'd like composition and framing to happen with all the elements that you place and the scene and the backdrop. Those are all artistic decisions, and there is a language that can describe that is uniquely professional. Talking about camera lenses and the types of frames and framing that you want, different angles that you want. All those things are things that, as an artist, you sort of do that in some ways subconsciously, but having the ability to create really good prompts and use really good reference material to train it on what you like and what you don't like and what you want to see and what you don't want. Those types of things, I think, still require true artists at even a base level. And so that is really where I think this will come in. Your artistic abilities will still be reflected even in AI generated tools, just like what a coder does. The quality of the coder is definitely going to be reflected even if they're using AI tools. It's not going to be a replacement. It really, as I said, frees them up to do the hard, complex, creative stuff without having to get down into the weeds for all the baseline stuff that are almost like libraries, that they would bind into a program they're generating. So, I think there's really a good mix. And yeah, I mean, what Michael's saying is really true. It is something where good programmers are always going to be better, at least for the foreseeable future, than what you get with AI. And it's also just figuring out how something should go together and creative ways to do things. Those are the interesting problems to solve, whether it's in art or coding. So I think that's always going to take really skilled people with a really creative bent. And I view programmers as just different artists. It's a different mindset, but still an art and a creative endeavor. So, all right. Yeah, as I was saying, though, I just want to wrap up with, if you get a chance, definitely work with it. See what you can do, see what it can do, and then decide, whether this works for you or not. But it is, in my opinion, definitely worth the time. And like Bowles Promo is saying that he used Udio to create bits of music to play with. So yeah, I mean, this is that is all different elements that go into this. And so like I'm really lucky because I get to work with a lot of people in my family. And the person who did all the music for Streaming Alchemy, so like that whole intro music and that's my nephew, Martin. His brother Joe works here with us. So but he's a composer, and he's actually does trailer music and other stuff. And so he's been very successful there. But so there are elements that, definitely there's just something unique that you're going to get from somebody who's creating this music themselves versus generated. But the little bit of music that we have between the main show and the post show, that's just stock music that we took and put in, because it was just a small segue that was a loop. And so I edited that and, created some interesting elements, but that was just sort of mixing together sort of different samples and stock music. So you can have both. And I think, that's probably where we'll end up. And we just decide where the important parts are and, focus the creative energy there. But definitely give it a shot. Look at it, see what works for you. And please, in the comments, let me know if you get a chance. You can go, post it in, the Facebook, on a Facebook page, or, the Facebook group, or, even, on the video at YouTube. Anything that, gives us more comments there and gets more discussion going is always great. So I think we're probably at a good break point now. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for hanging out a little longer here in the post show. And as I said, I will see everybody in 2 weeks. So until then, be safe, be well. Take care.